and Applied Science at Ivy Tech. Sue and I have gone back, Sue, probably at least a good 12, 14 years maybe, and have been working together. And thank you for all your support in Indiana and the Ivy Tech system, as really you've been a long-term founding member of NC3 and was an early adopter. So Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you and to your great panel today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Roger, and I appreciate that. Yes, we have it at Ivy Tech in Indiana. We have used certifications to build out our programs and to provide on and off ramps. And most of our programs in my school are built on those certifications. And it just makes sense because it's easy then for employers to upskill their incumbent workers as well as future workforce. So yeah, so we've enjoyed our relationship certainly with NC3, and we've just been invaluable partners, I feel like, to the state of Indiana and to the workforce in the country. So I appreciate being here and thank you for inviting me. We do have amazing folks on this panel, so I am going to get right to them, and I'm very interested in hearing what they have to say, not only from a perspective of education, because as educators, particularly at Ivy Tech, we strive to be aligned with our industry partners because they know the future needs and the current needs better than anyone. Also interested from an administration perspective, as I have been serving on a national skills coalition to advise the current administration, President Biden's administration, on what to do about the workforce infrastructure. And so I'm really interested to hear what everyone has to say. And so just to get started, I will have some questions just like the other panels. And then if you could hold your questions, unless it's a clarity type question, put them in the chat and Eric will get them and we'll get to them as we can. So just to get started, I want to introduce the panelists. And first up on the list is Paul McAndrew. And Paul is the VP and General Manager of Greenlee Tools. And he leads the business, which is out of Rockford, Illinois. And they have been producing high quality tools for professional electricians since 1862. So Paul joined Greenlee in 2017. And he is a believer in providing education and skills for the next generation workforce, not only to address the skills gap, but to ensure that we have the best workforce to drive our economy forward. And that is so true, Paul. That's going to separate our country from other countries, certainly. So Terry Collier, Terry is the Global Application Engineering Director with 3M Electrical Markets Division. Terry is, he's part of the team of who partners with customers to deliver efficient, reliable, and sustainable energy. They serve the electrical market by understanding applications and delivering solutions. And we all know that that's critical for our own buildings and our own organizations. So, but Terry's passionate about learning and collaboration and the teaching that comes with solving problems. And I think that's really important because we hear from our employer partners every time I talk to them that folks need to learn to work in teams and need to have those problem solving skills. And so Terry will probably have some insight as to how to go about teaching those within our facilities. So he's worked in a range of roles, with groups in solar, wind, display, architectural glass, and even visual attention. So he's an inventor with 21 issued patents and author of peer-reviewed articles. Terry earned his PhD in macromolecular science from Case Western Reserve University and an MBA from the University of Minnesota Carlson School. So thanks for being here, Terry, and Paul too. So Chris Troline, Chris is a licensed professional engineer who spent 25 years analyzing and optimizing buildings for performance and energy efficiency. He's currently with Train's Building Data Analytics Division and Train Intelligent Services. So Chris is passionate about working with school districts and technical colleges and universities to transform campuses into virtual learning labs. So virtual living learning labs. And so that means that students can from every walk of life can have the power of data analytics in their own buildings. So Roger, did you have a question, or I thought I saw you raise your hand? Did you?
I was waving to the audience.
Oh, okay. Well, wave to our great panelists, right? So, all right. So we look forward to your insights, and this particular session. We understand technology is changing very rapidly in all of our industries, and certainly the pandemic has expedited those transportations and created a higher demand and really uncovered more gaps in education and industry. And so the only way that we can really address those is to collaborate with our industry partners. And so infrastructure needs are moving faster than ever before, with energy distribution and the growth of the population, the increased consumption, all the electrification that's going on, the smart highways, all of those things that will be happening. And so as educators, we'd like to know from this panel as educators how we can tap into these changes to support the current and future student populations and develop that future workforce. The goal that you keep hearing across the country is fossil free by 2035. And how is that going to happen? How are we going to get the workforce to make that happen? So that's why we've brought all these folks together. And these are real subject matter experts, and just coincidentally from NC3's renowned industry partners. And we're going to discuss how industry can support education in these emerging needs, and also how education can play a transformative role in meeting the needs of this growing sector. So the first question is for all three of you, and we'll just go in order, Paul, Terry, and Chris. We'd like to hear, what is the real need today in your industry? And what does the future look like? So Paul, you start?
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. It's a very dynamic topic that we're going to talk about today, and I think it's really good that we are taking the time out to talk, because we are at a pivotal moment, I feel, from not just a national perspective, but from an international perspective, as we could really try to address and become carbon neutral at some point in the short term from a future perspective. So if you think about the industry, there's been the skilled labor shortage for some time, and that's one of the things that Greenlee have been working with the NC3 in terms of trying to get that next generation of electricians to help our infrastructure and building our communities. But right now, that skill set is going to change in the future. The buildings are going to become more smarter, and I know Chris and Terry will talk a lot about that. The intelligence that goes into a building will be nothing like it was 5 years ago, or even 15 years ago. So we all see it in our homes. We can use thermostats with our phones. We couldn't do that 5 years ago. So everything is becoming smarter, which means that we're going to have a different skill set needed in the future than what we have today. So for me, the critical thing as we move forward is how we evolve as a workforce to meet the future demands. I think we know strategically what the future demands are, but if we don't align that with the skilled workforce that we need, we'll be unsuccessful in delivering to those requirements.
Thank you. Terry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's so great to be here and to see her and see so many of the great work that so many of the schools are doing. So I'm really glad to be here. And so as an application engineer, and one of the things that we do really well is work with our customers, everyone from installers all the way up to owners, to really understand where things are going. And so maybe I just wanted to lead off and talk about some of these trends that we're really excited about. And, the first I think we've talked about is that renewable energy space. And there have been hundreds of gigawatts of wind and solar that have been installed. And just to think about the size and scale of that, a gigawatt is 3 million solar panels. So if you can imagine, we talk about, as Paul just mentioned, things becoming smart. There's someone making each and every single one of these connections. And without those connections, nothing is smart, right? So it's easy to say there's so much work that has to go into doing it. The second area, and Sue hit on this already, is just the electrification of transportation. I think we think about electric cars, But I mean, this is going to be buses, it's going to be delivery vehicles, it's going to be scooters. I mean, you can even get an electric bicycle today. And as we begin to think about the electrification of transportation, both, just the change in manufacturing that will have to happen, as well as just the infrastructure to support all those charging devices. We talk about, you can get an electric vehicle, it's great for around town, but if you start taking a trip across the country, we don't really have the infrastructure to support it without very, very careful planning. And we got to get beyond that if we're going to get to the carbon neutral space that Sue mentioned. The other area is the cloud. I mean, if you think about your phone and all the devices that we have, every single device is connected somehow to a data center. So these data centers are massive computer processing spaces, you all know, and the most foundational, important thing that each of those centers have is power. So without electricity, you lose the cloud, which means you can't do your bank transactions. You can't surf the internet. There's so many things that you can't do, some probably more important than others to some of you, but they're all very critical in how we work. And so there's just a massive expansion in data centers, and just the level of power expectations that they have for electricity is really significant. And then lastly, as Sue mentioned, with the influx of some of the folks moving into areas, I live in Austin, Texas, and we're seeing just a massive influx of people into our community. The electricity grid was not built for what we're using it for today. When the electricity grid was initially built, it was built for lighting. And so today, if you begin to think about how different the electricity grid is and how it's being used compared to where it was, there's going to be so much work. And I think Tim talked about this yesterday in one of the opening sessions, of just the fact that so many of the utilities don't have the time to do some of the training that they used to do. And so now they're looking for those folks to come on and come in, knowing how to use all the tools, knowing so much about the processes, and just making some of these connections and splices and terminations. The thing I think that's really interesting that we don't necessarily think of is there is a direct line starting where the power is generated all the way to the outlet you are plugging in and using. And you can imagine the thousands of connections that have to be working all of the time to make this system work the way that we just expect it to work seamlessly. And so this all adds up to just a tremendous amount of demand. And I think Paul highlighted this well, of the breadth and the depth that we have a gap. We have a gap in just the number, and we have a gap in the breadth of just what some of those capabilities are for folks as we get into some of these new spaces.
Thank you, Terry. So Chris, what about training? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, good afternoon, and I'm excited to be here in this discussion as well. This is absolutely an exciting topic. What we're seeing really in the HVAC industry is that a lot of buildings and a lot of campuses and other folks that we deal with have aging infrastructure, right? Systems are getting older, and there's maybe been a delay in some of the repairs that could have happened before, right? And so now what's happening is that the workforce, the HVAC technicians and this type of installers is aging, and the average age is over the age of 56. And so as kind of the older guard starts to transition out of the role, that we're looking for a bench to backfill that. And exactly as Terry mentioned, right, the buildings are getting smarter and smarter every day. So there's this incredible opportunity for young students to enter a high demand, high wage workforce where there's an opportunity, right, to work with their hands as well as work with digital technology and keep these systems, install these systems and keep them operating efficiently. There's a high emphasis on energy efficiency these days with buildings, and a lot of that has to do with the cost of energy, peak demand charges, which is that one moment of the month that you use the maximum amount of energy in your building. That is becoming an increasing cost as utilities start to manage this new future, which includes renewable energy and other things that are going on. And so whether it's renewable energy that's being produced in the building and connected to the grid, or distributed generation and other things that are on the horizon, the amount of available jobs in this workforce is growing, right? In just the HVAC world, it's projected that we need 44,000 HVAC technicians to enter the workforce, not only this year, but over each year for the next 10 years. So this isn't going away anytime soon. And so we really appreciate partnering with NC3 partners to build that log of workers.
Thanks, Chris. And that brings up some real questions too. And there are a couple questions from the audience that I think we can incorporate here. So, you know, you're talking about the grid and how much energy we use. And of course, there's a heat wave now out in the West. And so it's straining it even more. And so, you know, there are all these, I guess, all of these level of awareness raising events that are happening, for lack of a better term. And yet we still have a very difficult time, you know, recruiting students into these careers. So there's obviously a strong demand, but, you know, where is the disconnect in today's workforce? So I can tell you what our challenges are. So in education, we have challenges, and maybe you can think about these over the course of the discussion, but we struggle to find instructors. Right now, I have 3 openings in Indiana for HVAC instructors, for example, that I know of. And so how do we find those? And then, you know, that begs the question too, how can we work with schools, and how can schools actually work with local industry partners in these areas to gain the interest of the students? No, 2 of them barriers, demand, you know, is recruiting and qualified faculty, but what are some others, or how would we address those? Paul, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Sue, some of the key issues when I speak to the Electrical Training Alliance, which does the fully qualified apprenticeship for an electrician, is the attrition that happens in the first year or 18 months is so significant. It's around about 35%. So if they are looking for 8,000 to 10,000 qualified electricians every year coming out of a 5-year apprenticeship, in the first year, they lose in a third of those. I think that's partly because they haven't had the opportunity to learn about some of these skills, either at a high school perspective or from a community college perspective. And I think that's where the NC3 plays a real critical part then, to actually give that grounding understanding of what could be achieved from a career, a vocational career. As Terry touched upon, and Chris, these can be very well paid jobs. I meet a lot of presidents of electrical companies who started as apprenticeships, and now they're the president of their own company, sometimes $300-400 million companies. So the kind of stigma about not going to college and going down a vocational route is something that everyone on this call has a responsibility to address and give people a better insight about what careers can become from this. And they are changing those careers. They are becoming a lot more intelligent. You're going to be using a lot more software and all those different aspects. But if we don't get that pipeline filled up, we are not going to achieve what we want to achieve as both from a national and a kind of global perspective.
I think that's very true. And so just a follow-up question for you, maybe, Paul, how would you, I guess, suggest we do that?
Well, first of all, I think it started already as the colleges and schools that work with the NC3 look to make those investments into whether it's HVAC, electrical, all those different trainings where maybe we've neglected for some time. And then the important part then is making the investment in the trainers then, as you talked about. And unfortunately, right now there's a national shortage of workers, which is across all the different trades, and everywhere you drive is help needed. But I think we just have a responsibility to open the eyes up to people how exciting these careers can be and the opportunities that come from them, whether you're welding, whether you're using pneumatics or Festo, whether you're doing HVAC, wherever they are, these are all exciting careers that can give a lot of opportunity to people. And make those investments back in our schools to actually have the facilities to do those training.
Thanks, Paul. So Terry, what are your thoughts about around some of these questions and these real strong demand, but not enough students to meet that demand, or employers who are working with our education partners?
It's been interesting as you work in corporate America. One of the things you realize very quickly is the power of advertising, and how that can change perception. And one of the areas I would really say is we really need to increase the visibility to, I think, some of what Paul says of what an electrician does, what those opportunities are, and earlier. So if you think about the some of the areas that got a lot of excitement were, law shows were very popular, police shows, doctor shows. Those are the things that get so much attention just because of how much airtime people have perceptions of what these roles are. But I mean, there's a complete range in many of those roles as well. And so I think we really need to be able to continue to promote and talk about what people do, and leveraging social media, leveraging the certifications early. I was so excited at the earlier session to see that, we're even looking at some certification options for middle school students. And so how do you get kids to say, hey, you know what, I'm interested in becoming an electrician, and potentially matching what an electrician does to their passion, and really beginning to build that early so it begins to be something that builds, and figuring out ways to continue to fuel the flames of that interest over time as they're moving. Because then when they're making the choice about, hey, what do I do next? This becomes a very attractive offer because this is something they've seen, this is something they've been doing. And one of the areas we found really attractive is, as Chris mentioned, the average age of many of those electricians are certainly moving up, advancing. But many of those folks, while they aren't able or interested in doing that type of work anymore, love talking to students. And so we call them our gray eagles. And so we've reached out to quite a few gray eagles who have come back and done programs with us, and are so excited to be able to talk to kids, are so excited to be able to engage and train, show them how to do some things. And so that's been a huge win for us, is being able to connect with so many other folks in the community to really begin pulling them in. And they've loved it. The kids have loved it. And they've got an incredible number of stories just to tell from their experience and background. So for me, it's really about the visibility. It's about showing them people. We talk about, I think as Jackie mentioned in the previous session, we talk about see it, believe it, and then become it. And so we want to help people see it. We want to connect them with things that they can believe it, and ultimately helping them to get some of the certifications so they believe they can start becoming it.
Thank you, Terry. I certainly agree. We see a lot, like through shows like Grey's Anatomy, we see what doctors and nurses do. Those don't look like glamorous jobs to me, just to be honest. Those look like a lot of hard, very challenging and stressful work. So Chris, what from an HVAC perspective?
Yeah, so one of the things that was exciting that a couple of years ago, as we partnered with our NC3 partners to really rebrand this idea of HVAC technician, because the HVAC technician of the past, someone that might come fix your air conditioner in your backyard, is not necessarily, there's still a need for that repair, but it's not necessarily the only option that's out there. And so by rebranding to climate and energy control specialist, it takes on this new greater job career that is now energy and environment. I find that young students, young people that I speak with, they have this big desire to do the right thing, right? They hear about climate change quite often, right? And to do their part. And so because buildings account for 40% of all the energy use on the globe, it's relevant. And so our ability to optimize buildings, reduce energy consumption, increase the use of renewable energies, all of these things that skilled trades that we're speaking about is right up the alley of somebody who's kind of technologically inclined, maybe wants to work their hands as well. And so all of these careers, the electricians that Paul spoke about, as well as HVAC, climate and energy control, technology, there's a huge opportunity to engage these students because of the importance that it is for our communities, but also the world. And so if we can engage them and find them and create an interest at a younger age, right? We've developed younger curriculum for feeder districts just to create an awareness that, hey, this is out there. The students that I've had the opportunity to work with directly, they kind of all say the same thing at the end of our project. They say, wow, I didn't realize that. This was new. I didn't know this was out there. And so if we can reach someone by the age of I don't know, 8th grade or something like this, as they start to figure out what they may be interested in and pursuing, even during high school with career pathways or post high school, then now we've started to create something, right? Create that interest that you just spoke about. And so it's been exciting to be a part of that and create those opportunities. And I'll kind of echo what Terry said a minute ago, your question about where do we find great instructors, right? Some of the ones that I've seen the most successful have come right out of industry. So reaching out to your industry partners and speaking with them, say, hey, we have a couple of open positions. You know, what do you think? Is there anyone around? And maybe it's somebody that works inside the field that's honed their skill a little bit and wants to either give back or has a passion for teaching, or even wants to play a bigger game. I can't think of a bigger impact to make than training our next generation workforce.
Yeah, that's very true. So the advice that we're getting, I think, is great as educators from you all, that you know, rebranding and working with industry partners to really change the perception at a very young age of these careers is going to be critical to support the infrastructure jobs of the future. So,
hey, Sue, can I jump in with one more thing? I just wanted to piggyback on something Chris said, which I thought was really good.
Sure.
Which is, you know, when we do surveys for students, most students in the younger demographic are mission driven and really are looking to get aligned with some big mission. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity now, because as I talked about some of those mega trends, and I think you talked about them as well, there are some really big mega trends that everyone's talking about that I think that people can get really excited about getting behind, because these are big missions, whether it's climate, and I love the train, the train commitment to the environment, the Giga Pledge that they've made. And, you know, there's so many of these big, and 3M has made some as well. There's just some really big things happening. And so the more that we can leverage and talk about some of these big transitions that are happening in our society and energy and electricity, I think the more that we can elevate some of these roles that are absolutely critical to helping those become real.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So the next question is really about how can schools work to sort of meet those needs? How can we raise the level of our professional development, maybe our facility transformation, some of those kinds of things, but to really meet the current and future training needs. So how do we scale that? And do you think we already have those programs, or do you think we don't have those programs and we need to create them? You know, just what are your thoughts about that?
So firstly, I think we've made great strides over the last few years, particularly since the NC3 has really tried to make this connection with the vocational colleges in terms of doing more of this type of training, you know, started with the Gateway College. Are we where we want to be? No, we are not. I think we recognize that across all the different trades, that we have a lot more depth that we need to put to each one of these industries or training programs to get the depth needed to allow our students to move on to be ready for that career. So, but I think the biggest thing that we are doing, we recognize we have these gaps, and we are working with the likes of the NC3 and the industry partners to develop those curriculums that are always going to evolve. I don't think any curriculum is a static environment. So we have to be working to evolve those continually. We probably need to be accelerating more right now. I think Terry made a really great point. We are at a pivotal moment in terms of being able to leverage the mega trend around climate and carbon neutral to try and encourage more of the next generation students to take this career path.
Thank you. Barry?
I love as I've gotten to see the session yesterday that I was part of and listening in. There's so many good programs and blueprints that NC3 has put together for a school just to go after. That seems like to that first step that Paul mentioned is phenomenal. The other thing I get excited about is being able to build some of these systems. Right. So I think, when we train, one of the things that we get excited about is not just teaching people how to do what they need to do, but also teaching them the why behind why they need to do it. Because as they begin to see so many differences in what they're going to find in a space, really understanding the why they have to do it and the why behind really continues to fuel that passion. And so we love the idea of continuing to build systems and where people can have as much hands-on as possible, as well as understanding the systems and then being able to test some of these things. So if you begin to look at what's happening with solar, there are much more simple solar systems you can now get to be able to both install and do testing on and do diagnostics on. And you begin to look at each of these areas. I think there's so many ways we can create great models that give us data back. I'm really excited about it. That's something that we're doing a lot more of, is creating some of these model systems that people can not only get the hands-on, but also get all the rest of it that then really scales well. So we're excited about what's happening in this space from both a knowledge standpoint and the trends happening in technology to build some of these micro systems that people can work on.
Thank you. It's data analytics and IT skills are becoming our new general education in our programs. So, Chris?
Yes, I think we've made great strides in the direction of some of these new careers and fields, right? As you just mentioned, data analytics, that applies to practically every career that's out there. So if we can get a student exposed to that and create an awareness that no matter what field they go into, that their ability to recognize data that would be useful and then create an analysis and then communicate that to us are invaluable skills that would serve all of the next generation workforce, right? Especially climate and energy control technology. So trains certifications around HVAC systems, residential and commercial, as well as building automation systems, like those are there for the NC3 partners to take part in and train that huge deficiency in workforce and those available jobs, as I mentioned, on the 10-year horizon. And then as well as the data analytics, we're excited about to expose students to not only energy in their building but also in their environment and sustainability and utility grids and all of these things that we spoke about, the infrastructure, right? That around electrification and sustainability in our world. And to your point, what's next? Well, we learned over this last year and a half or so how big of a deal indoor air quality is, right? This was a topic that as engineers we've been aware for quite some time, but maybe wasn't quite so mainstream. So now we have an interest from our school partners, right, that their buildings are safe and healthy and students can get into the classroom. And now we have an opportunity to bring that into the classroom. So by leveraging the available data, which is building data, right, temperatures and humidities and these types of things, as well as energy consumption, not only for the building, but for systems that like solar systems and renewable energy, that students can not only learn about their building, but they can turn their campus into a living learning lab where the data from the solar panels, we have schools that are putting that into the classroom now, and the students can see, well, what time does it turn on in the morning and what time at night? And what we find is when the students have real examples and hands-on experience with their own building, this isn't a textbook, or it isn't some building across the country, it's their own building, and they can start to analyze that or the other one on campus that they're familiar with, that it just creates this incredible experience that opens up opportunities for them. And so there's a huge opportunity that now with the funds that are available, infrastructure bills, grants, as well as other programs like performance contracting and other financial vehicles that folks can take advantage of, that they can not only just do a construction project repairing their building, but that they can upgrade that for performance, for energy efficiency, but maybe most importantly, to bring that into the classroom and leverage that data in their educational. So it's a great time to optimize your buildings as well as optimize your curriculum.
That's really interesting and for next steps. So I guess that's kind of the next question that we had in the session, formal question. How can we utilize this network that's been created to take these first steps toward these opportunities that you all have mentioned? So Paul, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we are a real great opportunity, and we have to approach this collaboratively. I think the industry partners are already doing that with the NC3. But if I'm a school, where do I invest in? Do I invest in welding? Do I invest in electrical? Do I invest in HVAC? But we have to be able to network across the schools then. So if I can speak to a school in Texas and they done electrical training, how did that work out? And share those practices through the NC3 or directly, because we need to build the confidence of the schools to allow them to make those investments as well. You know, that's a critical part of the school to decide how to make those investments. You know, in an ideal world, we would have all these skills in all our schools, and we would be pumping students through and training them and getting them ready for the next opportunity. But to do that, it really does come down to collaborating, not just with the NC3, but across the schools to try and learn what went well, what could we do differently if we were to invest in that type of training facility.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And we probably don't do enough of that best practices sharing. So it's great to have these types of venues to do some of that best practice sharing. Terry?
You know, the thing I get excited about was hearing some of the challenges that went out across this group of each school building off of what the other schools were already doing. We as industry partners are here to help. We couldn't be more excited, and we're here because we have a passion for training. We have a passion for improvement in the space. And maybe most of all, we know that our products work. The magic happens between when our products are installed well by a passionate installer. That's where the real magic happens, and we can truly reach the benefit. So, you know, we have a very, very clear alignment and interest with helping to get the best trained folks working on our parts that are going to be everywhere throughout the world. And so we're excited about helping to train. So certainly leverage the knowledge that we have from the projects we've done with other schools and other programs we do, of even replicating some of the things we do internally. Just to be candid, many of the things that we do externally, we have guinea pigged and prototyped inside 3M to figure out if that works. And the things that work, we do more of, and the things that don't, we try to learn from those too, and kind of never do them again. So what we end up sharing with you are typically things we've got some good confidence in and we've seen some success in before. And I think putting in the new environment with students is always exciting for us to see how they respond to it as well. So I would agree with Paul of saying benchmarking, learning, growing, optimizing, not with just other schools, but also with the corporate partners.
Sure. Fail forward, right?
That's right.
Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with both the other panelists, right? That industry partners can be here to help support you. We've at training, I think we find that we're most successful when we work collaboratively, and the earlier we're in on the conversations, the better. We love to join with you in your master planning, and maybe you have space utilization studies going on right now. Maybe some of your classes are going virtual, et cetera. And there's a redesign that needs to happen on your campus. Maybe you have aging buildings that either need to be upgraded or shifted in some manner. Whatever the case may be, that we can work with you to understand your needs. Identify some of the risk, maybe potential. We had one client, for example, that wasn't quite clear that, hey, you've got these very old chillers that are kind of at the end of their life, and they're in an obsolete refrigerant, and this could be a kind of a costly thing if these went down. So we help them understand that this might make sense to move to the top of the priority list. And again, if if those master planning conversations are of use to you, then we can also bring in the discussion about how we can leverage that into support your curriculum. And again, one of the things that we are having great success with is bringing that data into the classroom, right? And data analytics or optimizing buildings. So it really is a win-win-win situation, a win for the university, the facility staff that now hopefully can take care of their buildings easier with greater performance from their buildings and updated systems and data analytics to support the performance of the building, as well as supporting the students in their education and in new technologies and data and analytics and renewable systems and all of these future career opportunities. We've had multiple successes with different folks around financing options for that, right? And oftentimes, I would just encourage you to leverage your dollars. If you can build a construction project and also use it in the classroom, fantastic. If you can leverage grant monies as well as some of your budget dollars, as well as potentially a performance contract, which is an energy conservation project that's going to benefit energy savings. If you can leverage those dollars together, then you really got something. And as an industry professional, we'd love to support you in however that is, whatever your vision is. So there's multiple ways. Example, one of our clients had a $21 million grant, and they coupled it with a $5 million performance contract, and they through that were able to implement NC3 curriculum, as well as some of the curriculum for feeder school districts that was going to be available that would help create this awareness and excitement about these STEM careers.
So that kind of brings up another question, Chris, that is from the audience around, how can schools, and you've been talking about this just a bit in your answer, Chris, is how can schools align goals with new administration policies? So we know there's going to be a lot of this infrastructure money, trillions of dollars that's coming. And so, and I am privy to know that the dollars for training go in and out of the budget or of the bill daily. So how can the schools really best align with the goals with new administration policy?
Yeah, that's a great comment, right? With this new infrastructure bill, this is really kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity that now we're seeing potentially that schools actually have some money to do some of these improvements, not only improving their buildings for energy, but also in performance, but indoor air quality is a big section of that infrastructure bill. And so if we can leverage that into the curriculum. And so to answer your question, I think it's a conversation that needs to happen, right? And we need to get everybody pulling the cart in the same direction, buying into the same vision that, hey, here's what's possible. And I would say maybe initially there's a lot of folks that wouldn't understand that this is possible. And so educational folks from your organization, as well as senior administration, like getting them on the same page and say, hey, here's the vision. We'd love to train our students around, future technology careers, data analytics, et cetera. And here's one way that we think this is possible. Would this work? And we can address aging building infrastructure, as well as upgrade our curriculum to meet those industry needs. And I think that's the first starting point, right? Is to get them on board. Where we find the projects are most successful is when we have senior decision makers from the organization aligned with the curriculum folks, aligned with the facility folks, right? And if all three of those are in agreement and alignment, well, then there's almost nothing that can stop what's possible.
Sure. Terry, Paul, either of you have anything to add to that around the question of the new administration policies and aligning with those?
I would just add, Sue, I think it's a great opportunity to set a vision for a school, because it is tied to something that's tangible that they see on the media and what a longer term direction is of the country then. So it really then, hopefully that's something we can leverage as a school to encourage sometimes parents, sometimes students want to go down this path, but the parent is not so supportive of that. That can be sometimes half the battle then, to actually get the parent convinced that this is a good career for their child to pursue.
So just a follow-up question for you on that, Paul, and maybe Terry too, because you had mentioned this as well about social media. So in recruiting students, Maisie, raising the awareness of energy and building trades, how successful do you think social media is with recruiting students and maybe raising the awareness of parents and others around these careers?
Well, I love the way Paul just framed it up, thinking of, the way I just wrote that down, thinking about is the trends, the dollars and the investments that are happening, and then the opportunities, and seeing all of those things as a pipeline and a path. And so the more that you can use whatever media to talk about trends, and the reason we like social media so much is you have just incredible reach. Right, you can reach a number of folks that may not have been reachable before, depending on how you end up doing it. And so those trends that continue to be the overarching, then having the investments in building some of these living labs, doing the improvements. I mean, I think there are all sorts of applications in both energy generation and energy conservation that you can integrate into your building, as well as infrastructure improvement. So if you can put those together, I think that really spells opportunity. You can see that opportunity locally. And then with those trends, you see those opportunities at the macro level. And then that also frames up really well the work you're doing in your microsystem there at the school, the hands-on experience, and then also how that applies to that macro level. And I think one of the things that Paul mentioned early on was how many people drop out of programs when they start. So that first year, we see a tremendous amount of folks dropping out of these apprentice programs. But really, if you believe it, you've done it, you've had your hands in it, those become hurdles and challenges compared to barriers. And that's really ultimately what we want to do. So if we can link all three of these together, that's where I think the most power comes from.
So I guess that another question from the audience, and maybe that you've answered this a little bit, Terry, but anyone who wants to take this on, maybe what infrastructure issues have we overcome in recent years? And then how can we use those to anticipate future needs? Anyone want to try that one? Chris?
I think one of the things that we've overcome, or at least are aware of and are addressing, right, is the utility grid, right? And meaning the need, we all recognize there's a need to upgrade that as renewable technologies come online, and distributed generation and more homes, end users start to generate electricity. How does that connect to the grid? And then how do we share that across different areas of the country? And so I think there was a lot that was learned this winter through the blackout down in Texas, right? And so those are examples of where we recognize the need, and I think the industry is clear what needs to move forward for that to be solved. And so although I wouldn't say it's solved, I do say that the awareness is there, and the action is being taken to address that, for example, right? So there's a perfect example of, hey, here's an issue and an opportunity to improve this, and what we need to have happen, and then action being taken.
So if I understand your question correctly as well, I would say, here what we're doing right now is showing the benefit of us seeing a challenge and identifying ways to improve and take that on. And what I really get excited about is how we begin augmenting some of the experiences. And I think it was Paul who mentioned the collaboration with other schools. There are ways we can leverage tools such as this to really be able to take advantage of our new. One of the things we get excited about at 3M is the ability to drive increased specialization, because we can have experts at different places. We can have experts geographically different spaces who can all do training in a local space. So for example, some of the training we mentioned, you can have a person who's doing training remotely, and whether the students are together or the students are remote, the teacher can be remote. I mean, I think there's all sorts of options, and I think we've had a tremendous amount of success over this past year taking advantage of that. And I think there are lots of lessons we can learn as we move forward from this experience of how do we now integrate area expertise in a local setting.
Thank you. All right, well, I don't see any other questions. So we have about 10 minutes left, right, Erica? Maybe 10 minutes or so?
Yep, we've got about 10 minutes left. Do we want to open the floor to live Q&A?
Yeah, I think so. I think this has been always sparking some really interesting discussion.
Perfect. If anybody wants to raise their hand or unmute yourself, you're welcome to answer or ask any questions.
Hey, Erica, this is Roger. I got a question really maybe this would include Sue as well too, is, with the need, we know that the grid needs to be updated and those pieces, as Chris talked on about, if we're going to do have energy savings, all these things, and Terry touched on how these all things work together. If there's a message, or as our schools and our network out there, so you kind of touched on this from a policy standpoint, what is that big policy dialogue that should happen from our local schools, that bubbling up, whether that happens in their communities, at their state level, and of course up to the federal? What are those key content, those key words that we know we know the administration is supportive, but Sue, as you touched on, it goes in and out. But at the end of the day, I think Paul touched on this, which really caught me, is that, from where power is generated all the way to that plug in your house that turns on your coffee maker, makes the internet work, make everything else work. There's a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of upkeep in there. So how do we get that policy message at the incremental level, at the local level? What is those key talking points that are important for us to be always consistently funneling up? Because this is a long-term piece. We're going to need workforce on these issues for 5-10 years at least.
Sure. Well, I can kind of start from my perspective and in my work with the Biden administration. I think we have to talk about, the workforce. We have to be very open and honest about the skills deficits that were there pre-COVID that have not been addressed, and they're still there. The challenge of recruiting folks to these careers is there as well. I think we have to also speak to hiring folks to do the work within the communities where the work's being done. We have to talk in that language as well. So not hiring folks from another state to come in and do the work, installing 5G and those kinds of things. So I think the work needs to be done there, and that's something that we have to talk through with the administration. And I also think we need to be mindful of diversity and inclusion and being able to really reach out to, I think it was Chris who said, these learning labs are available for all demographics. It's not, they don't discriminate and need all of our population. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sue. If we get over that barrier of diversity and inclusion here, we can open the pool up, then the playing field is going to open up far more significantly in terms of students. So I agree with that, and we are at a critical inflection point then where we can address this, because if we don't address it, we won't have the infrastructure. Then is just a pillar of growing the economy, and the economy will not grow without that foundation and that pillar from the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is going to change and become more modern in terms of addressing the needs of the world, as the world has changed significantly, but it's still a pillar of the house. And if we don't invest in that pillar, then we are not going to grow any economy.
I'll add that I think there's a huge opportunity to decide where do we want to go, right? What are the communities that we want to create, right? If we're committed to solving climate initiatives and creating opportunities for our young workforce, next generation, then as Sue, as you mentioned, right, like there's a huge opportunity right now, and there's a skills gap between the available jobs that are out there right now, and the NC3 partners are a huge part of that. And so those conversations need to be happening around that. Hey, here's the opportunity, here's the gap, and here's some ideas on how we can get there, and then here's the resources that we need to make that happen. And so focusing on creating those opportunities, which are going to allow us to create these infrastructure and things like renewable energy and sustainability, to make all of that possible is going to require a skilled workforce. And that's going to involve career technical centers like the folks on this call, as well as awareness for younger students at a younger age that, hey, there's great opportunities out there. What are you interested in? Here's an idea. Here's a project, right? STEM and you know, and I was involved with an organization, Project Scientist, a couple of weeks ago, which was for young women around STEM careers, and it was just an awareness. So those are the types of things that are critical to supporting, you know, Train's desire for workers, but our community as a greater whole.
Thank you. Erica, I know we have about 2 minutes, right?
Yep, we had a question from Sasha. She had her hand raised. So Sasha, go ahead.
Great, thanks.
Oops.
You're on mute, Sasha.
Thanks. I'll be really, really quick. I'm Sasha Nelson from a community college in a coal impacted service area, not just at one town, but an entire region that will see the sunset of our extractive industries in the next 8 years and counting down. So, you know, there's a lot of impact here. We don't have a great deal of educational opportunities in this field, but we are going to have an amazingly skilled workforce in need of transition. So what I'm wrestling with really is, do we look at existing programs elsewhere and bring those to our area? Or do we start with a fresh slate and really be innovators and test and experiment in order to support that new energy economy? You're not going to have time to answer because we're getting the countdown clock, but I would love if you would reach out and inform me, because I'm really grappling with my lack of expertise in this area and would value your input. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Sasha, I think, and Sue, if I'll jump in, Sasha, thank you for that. And I think our panel this is what Terry and Paul, everybody just spoke about. We're here to not just help, but we will reach out to you, and because there's a lot of this transition. If we're going to continue to grow, we got to do the heavy lifting as well too. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you, everyone.